You know that strange moment when the whole house goes quiet and your brain suddenly gets louder? You turn off the light, you put your phone down. You're finally tired enough to sleep. And then out of nowhere, your mind decides this is the perfect time to remember that awkward thing you said 4 years ago, or that text you sent earlier, or the look on someone's face before they said, "No, I'm fine." And suddenly, you're not trying to fall asleep anymore. You're in a full conversation with your own thoughts. You replay things, you analyze things, you start connecting dots that didn't even exist 5 minutes ago. And here's the weird part. During the day, you were fine. You answered emails, you talked to people, you got things done, you functioned. But the second the world gets quiet, your mind starts opening drawers you didn't even know were there. Psychology has an explanation for that. Night doesn't necessarily create more thoughts, it removes distractions. That sounds simple, but it changes everything. During the day, your attention is constantly being pulled outward. Conversations, notifications, work, noise, decisions, tiny responsibilities stacked on top of each other. Your brain spends hours reacting. At night, most of that disappears, and when external stimulation drops, internal awareness rises. That's when unfinished thoughts start walking back into the room. That conversation you brushed past earlier, that disappointment you didn't really process, that small moment that felt off but you didn't have time to understand, it all comes back. Not because your brain is broken, because it finally has enough silence to hear itself. And people who think a lot at night usually assume they're overthinking. Sometimes that's true, but often it's something more specific. It's unfinished processing. Your brain is trying to make emotional sense of things you didn't fully digest while you were busy living through them. That's why a completely normal day can suddenly feel emotionally louder at midnight. Think about how often this happens. Somebody says something slightly different than usual. You notice it, but there's work to do, people around, places to be, so you keep moving. Later that night, your mind returns to it. Why did that feel different? Were they upset? Did I miss something? Was that about me? And now your body's lying in bed, but your mind is doing detective work. That's actually more common than people realize, especially if you're the kind of person who notices small shifts. Tone, energy, pauses, the tiny emotional details most people miss. Some people walk into a room and notice what's being said. Other people notice what's not being said. That second group usually thinks more at night. And there's a reason for that. Research around emotional regulation shows that some people process feelings as they happen. Others process feelings after the moment has passed. Not because they want to, because that's how their system works. In real time, they stay composed, they function, they respond normally. Then, later, when things get quiet, the emotional meaning catches up. That doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It might just mean your brain processes experience more slowly and more deeply. And honestly, that can be exhausting because nighttime turns into this strange emotional backlog. Your body wants rest, your mind wants answers, and those two don't always cooperate. But here's where it gets even more interesting. A lot of nighttime overthinking isn't actually about what happened, it's about uncertainty. The human brain hates unfinished patterns. Psychologists call this cognitive closure. In everyday language, it means your mind wants things to make sense. It wants a clean ending, a clear answer, a reason. And when it doesn't get one, it keeps searching. That's why unanswered texts feel bigger at night. That's why vague conversations become entire internal documentaries. That's why "I'll talk to you later" can somehow become emotional archaeology by midnight. Because uncertainty creates space, and the brain doesn't like empty space, so it fills it. Usually with prediction. Usually with worst-case prediction. Not because you're dramatic, because your brain would rather prepare for pain than be surprised by it. That's one of the oldest survival strategies we have, and when you're tired, that system gets louder. A lot louder. There's also something else happening. At night, memory becomes more emotional. Have you ever noticed that certain memories return differently after dark? An old relationship, an embarrassing moment, a version of yourself you miss, a conversation you thought you were over. And suddenly, it doesn't feel like memory. It feels current, almost physical. That's because memory isn't stored like a video file. It gets rebuilt every time you revisit it, and your current emotional state shapes how it feels. So if you're tired, lonely, uncertain, or emotionally open at night, old memories don't just come back, they come back heavier. You don't just remember what happened, you remember how it felt. And sometimes that's what keeps people awake. Now, here's the part people don't talk about enough. People who think too much at night are often very sensitive to relational signals. Not always anxious, not always insecure, just attentive. Their brain notices emotional movement quickly. A slower reply, the shorter message, a different tone, a slight distance. And once that signal lands, nighttime gives it room to expand. That's when the inner dialogue starts. Did I do something? Are they pulling away? Did I say too much? Should I have said less? And now something tiny feels enormous. The important thing to understand is this: your mind is not trying to ruin your peace. It's trying to protect connection. Humans are wired for belonging. When something feels uncertain socially, the brain pays attention because relationships have always mattered to survival. So when something feels uncertain socially, the brain pays attention because relationships have always mattered to survival. So sometimes what feels like overthinking is actually your nervous system asking, are we safe with people? That's a very human question, and that's not weakness. But here's the tricky part. Not every thought deserves a full investigation. That changes a lot once you realize that. Because people who think deeply at night often assume every thought means something important. It doesn't. Sometimes a thought is insight. Sometimes it's fatigue. Sometimes it's your fear borrowing your voice. Sometimes it's your nervous system trying to solve tomorrow at 1 in the morning. And those are not the same thing. That's why nighttime can be deceptive. Thoughts feel more convincing when the world is dark. They feel bigger, more permanent, more true. But they're often not. Morning has a way of changing proportions. You've probably felt that before. A thought that felt massive at 1:30 a.m. feels strangely manageable the next day. The problem didn't disappear. Your nervous system just returned to baseline. Perspective came back online. That matters a lot. There's also another pattern here that quietly affects almost everybody. Social comparison gets louder at night. That's when you start thinking about people your age. Who seems further ahead? Who seems more certain? Who seems more settled? And suddenly your mind starts building quiet pressure. Why don't I have this figured out yet? Why does everyone else look more stable than me? Why am I still thinking this much? But what's happening there is deeply unfair. You're comparing your internal world to other people's external image. You know your doubts, your unfinished thoughts, your late-night fears. But with everyone else, you mostly see the polished version. That comparison will almost always hurt because you're measuring private reality against public appearance, and that's never a balanced equation. The truth is, a lot of people who seem calm during the day have their own private nighttime conversations too. You just don't hear them. And maybe that's the deeper point here. People who think too much at night are often people who feel deeply, notice carefully, and process honestly. That can feel heavy, but it can also become wisdom. Because if you stay curious long enough, you begin noticing patterns. You realize which thoughts only show up when you're exhausted. You realize which worries belong to the present and which ones are old echoes. You realize which questions need reflection and which ones simply need sleep. That's emotional intelligence, not having no thoughts, knowing how to relate to them. And once that starts happening, night changes. The thoughts may still come, but they don't pull you under the same way. You stop treating every thought like an emergency. You stop assuming every feeling needs solving before morning. Sometimes you just notice it. There's that fear again. There's that memory. There's that unfinished conversation. And instead of chasing it, you let it pass. That's not avoidance. That's maturity. Some nights are not for solving your life. Some nights are just for ending the day, for letting your body soften, for accepting that not every question needs an answer tonight. That can be hard for thoughtful people, but it's powerful, because rest is not the absence of awareness, it's the decision not to keep digging. So if your mind gets louder at night, maybe don't treat that as failure. It might just be the moment your inner world becomes audible. There may be something worth hearing there. But there is also a point where your mind has done enough for one day. And sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is not answer every thought that knocks. Just because your mind offers a question doesn't mean tonight is the night you have to solve it. If you enjoy understanding human behavior, subscribe. And I'm curious, when your mind gets louder at night, what thought tends to visit you most often?